Top 7 Legendary Swords from the Ancient World. Swords of renown are the seeds of legend, fueled by tales of bloodshed and conquest. There have been swords throughout the history that have grown to mythical proportions, blending fact and fiction until the two are all but inseparable. We've found swords that might in fact be legends brought to life. Others have tales so bizarre we have to question their truth. There will never be another weapon that has left a greater impact on history as the sword, some more than others. Number 7. The Kusanagi. According to legend, the sword in the snake kusanagi was found in the body of an 8-headed serpent killed by the gods of storms and seas. It's part of the imperial regalia of Japan, icons of the ancient imperial families descent from the sun goddess, the symbols of their divine right to rule. The kusanagi is said to be housed in Atsuta Shrine in Nagano Prefecture, though it isn't on public display and hasn't been seen in centuries. The sword is occasionally brought out for imperial coronation ceremonies, but it's always kept shrouded in wrappings. Even though it has never been seen and is only recorded in collections of oral history and pseudo-historical documents, authorities have nevertheless succeeded in keeping the world guessing about the kusanagi by never officially confirming nor denying its existence. The only official mention of the sword came after World War II, even though the late Emperor Hirohito disavowed any claim to his divinity. He was also recorded as having ordered the divine regalia's keepers to defend them at all cost. Number 6. The 7-branch sword. In 1945, a mysterious sword was found in Japan's Isonokami Shrine. The sword was of exceedingly unusual make, with 6 protrusions branching out from its sides. The tip is considered its 7th. The sword was in poor condition, but a faded inscription could be made out along the blade. The exact translation has been questioned numerous times, but what is clear is that the sword was a gift from a Korean king to a Japanese monarch. This matched a sword found in Nihon Shoki, a folklore-infused historical document cataloging the early history of Japan. If this was the same 7-branch sword given to semi-mythical shaman Empress Jingu, it would have been as an important keystone, marking where legend became fact. The dating on the blade matched reliable sources in China, Korea, and Japan. The Isonokami Shrine itself was also mentioned in other documents dating from the time of the Nihon Shoki, so the sword could well have been left there since ancient times. Scholars now believe the 7-branch sword is the actual sword from the legend, giving the shaman Empress Jingu an authentic place in history. Number 5. The Cursed Muramasas. Muramasa was an ancient Japanese swordsmith who, according to legend, prayed that his sword would be great destroyers. Because of the exceptional quality of his blades, the gods granted his request and imbued him with bloodthirsty spirit that, if not sated with battle, would drive the wielder to murder or suicide. There are countless stories of the Muramasa's wielders going mad or being murdered. The swords were believed to be cursed and were banned by imperial edict. The edict was made by Shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu, who condemned the sword after they killed nearly all of his family. His grandfather had fallen to a Muramasa, and both Ieyasu and his father had been wounded by the swordsmith's blades. Finally, both his wife and his adopted son were later executed by supposedly cursed swords. But were Muramasa's blades really cursed? Likely, Ieyasu's trouble with the swords began simply because they were extremely popular. Muramasa was not the name of one man, but the entire school of swordsmiths he founded. Quality Muramasa blades had been produced for close to a century, and Japan's warriors class used them often. The fact that Muramasa swords were used in so many killings related to the shogun, while certainly a coincidence, was not exactly remarkable. Number 4. Joyous. Joyous, King Charlemagne's legendary sword, was said to change colors 30 times every day and was so bright it outshone the sun. Since as early as 1271, 2 swords called Joyous have been part of French coronation ceremonies. But since both swords can be famed joyous, the mystery of which one is the true sword of the Holy Roman Emperor has lingered for centuries. The joyous residing in the lover has suffered heavy modification over its considerable lifetime. The oldest section is the pommel, which recent tests place sometimes between 10th and 11th centuries. Since Charlemagne died in 813, this puts it just outside the Holy Roman Emperor's lifetime. The other contender is the saber of Charlemagne, housed in imperial treasury in Vienna. It is known how the sword became part of French imperial regalia, but the saber is dated to early 10th century, closer than joyous, but still just after the time of Charlemagne's legendary sword. The saber was probably fashioned by Hungarian swordsmith, which opened the door for additional legends, if it being the famed sword of Attila, which was said to have been given to Attila the Hun by Mars, the god of war. Sadly, this isn't really historically plausible either. Number 3. Saint Peter's Sword. There are several legends about the sword used by Saint Peter when he cut off the ear of the servant to the high priest in the Garden of Gethsemane. English lore has it brought to England by Joseph of Arimathea along with the Holy Grail. In 968, however, a sword was brought to Poland by Bishop Jordan, a sword which he claimed was the actual sword of St. Peter, moved to the Archdiocese Museum in Poznan. Did the mysterious sword belong to St. Peter? There are claims that the sword could have been made in eastern borderlands of the Roman Empire in the 1st century, but there is still little evidence to substantiate them except the, perhaps misplaced, faith of those who want to believe the sword is a genuine relic. The sword in Poland is a falchion, a type of sword likely not used during St. Peter's time. Metallurgy tests have also dated it long after the saint's death. Number 2. Durandal. For hundreds of years, a mysterious sword had been embedded in the cliff above the Notre Dame Chapel in Rocamadour, France. The monks say it is Durandal, a sword of the paladin Roland. According to legend, Roland hurled the holy blade into the side of the cliff to keep it from being captured by his enemies. Since the 12th century, the chapel has been a destination for sacred pilgrimages. In 2011, the sword was removed by the local municipality and given to the Cluny Museum in Paris for an exhibit. But is the sword actually Durandal? While the battle where Roland lost his life is a well-documented event, the first mention of Durandal was in the Song of Roland, composed hundreds of years later. About the same time, the Notre Dame monks began claiming the sword was Roland's. They likely linked their sword to Durandal since the Rocamadour was the starting point for his journey, even though its final battle happened hundreds of miles away in the valley of Roncesvalles. So unfortunately, unless Roland pitched a really good fastball, the sword in the cliff is likely nothing more than a story conjured up by the monks of the chapel. Still, where the sword really came from remains a complete mystery. Number 1. The Sword of Guzheng. In 1965, a remarkable sword was found in a dumb tomb in China. Despite being over 2,000 years old, there wasn't a spot of rust on it. The blade was so untouched by time. It even drew blood when one archaeologist tested its edge on his fingers. Besides its unearthly resilience, the craftsmanship of the etchings was also unbelievably detailed for a sword forged so long ago. It was for the time a complete mystery. Further study of the etchings concluded that it was a sword belonging to the Yu king, Guzheng, and is believed to be the legendary blade mentioned in the Lost History of Yu. According to the text, when King Guzheng had his sword collection appraised, there was only a single sword of merit. This sword was so magnificent, it was said to have been made with the combined efforts of heaven and earth. How did the sword stay in such excellent condition for over 2,000 years? Tests show the swordsmiths of Yu had reached such a high level of metallurgy, they were able to incorporate rust-proof alloys into their blades. Their swords were also treated with rust-resistant chemicals, helping them survive the ages relatively unblemished. In addition, and in a stroke of brilliant luck, the scabbard of this particular blade was nearly airtight, which prevented oxidation and allowed the legendary sword to be found in such pristine condition after it was enclosed in the tomb.